If you have a smart home, it's very likely that you're going to have to connect devices out in your home back to your smart home device or your smart home controller. And some others. Zigbee is a very popular one, and today I'm going to go over some controllers that I got from SMLIGHT that allow you to connect remotely to Zigbee and also locally to your local Zigbee devices. Let's get started. Now, full disclosure, SMLIGHT did send me these controllers that I'm about to talk about. They did not have any say-so in the video. They did not pay me to make the video. They just provided the product. So they make a bunch of different controllers. They've got the SLZB-06 series, the SLZB-07 series. And the difference between these are the different chipsets that are used within them. As you can see, these are all Ethernet-based devices. And these are USB devices. Now, the Ethernet-based devices allow you to connect a number of different ways. One of them being Ethernet, obviously, through the Ethernet port. You can also connect over Wi-Fi, although using Wi-Fi and Zigbee in the same network sometimes is problematic since they share some of the frequency band. And then you can also plug these directly into USB. The other ones here, the SLZB-07 series, also plugs in directly to USB. They don't have Wi-Fi or Ethernet connectivity available to them. Now, one of the other differences here between all of these devices is the chip that's used in it. You've got a CC2652P2 chip, a CC2652P7, and an EFR32 chip. Those all are Zigbee chips, and they differ slightly in their capability. If you look at this table here, and these are all available, this little chart is available on my blog if you want to look this up. I'll link the blog down below. You have the capability of a Zigbee coordinator, a Zigbee router, or Matter over Thread. And the CC265P2 chip, which is based on this one right here, these are in the SLZB-06 devices, and they will do coordinator. They will do the router, and they will do Matter over Thread. Matter over Thread requires a firmware update. In fact, all of this requires you to be running the appropriate configuration and the appropriate firmware. The 265P7 chip does not do router or Matter over Thread, and the EFR32 chip does also do Matter over Thread and a router function. Now, this EFR32 chip will also do multi-pan firmware. It supports the multi-pan firmware. However, I'm being told that multi-pan firmware is being deprecated by Home Assistant. I didn't really dig into that too much right now. Those of you in the Zigbee world probably know more about that than I do, actually. But there is a whole write-up about Matter and the fact that Matter is beta in Home Assistant, and all of the different things that you can do with Matter. If you want to read over that, you can click on the blog and get to this from there. Now, on the SMLIGHT website, they have a nice table that kind of outlines all the differences between these different devices. And obviously, it's very tiny for the video screen, but you can go to their website and take a look at this. It tells you the chips being used. So you've got Texas Instruments and you've got Silicon Labs. Your thoughts and opinions on those different chips probably will vary based on your experience, but at least the SLZB-06 has been tested by hundreds of users with little to no issue from what I'm reading in the documentation and the reviews. So I think that device is probably just fine with the Texas Instruments chip. And then, of course, you've got the Silicon Labs chip. Different chips that are in each one of these things, the core SoCs, and then you've got the capabilities, Zigbee to USB, Zigbee to Ethernet, Zigbee to Wi-Fi, USB powered, PoE powered, and whether or not it's compatible with Zigbee to MQTT and ZHA. And by the way, all of these devices, especially the ones I'm going to review today, are compatible with both ZHA and Zigbee to MQTT. The only thing that is different is anything with this EF32 chip is marked as experimental in Zigbee to MQTT. However, because ZHA and Home Assistant uses the same chip, it's definitely compatible with the Home Assistant ZHA install. But ZHA works with all the other chips as well and all these other devices that are on their website. What I'm going to get at later on is that it's really hard to choose which one of these that you should use. Just depends on your use case. It's pretty much 100%. There is a ranking table that they have also put on their website, giving the CC265-2P chip the #1 rank of this type of chip, the CC26 chips. And then of the EFR32 chips, the MG21 is the rank #1 chip. And it talks about the reasons why. And I might go into a little bit of this here a little bit later in this video. Now, one thing to note too is that if you look at the documentation for this, let's just take a look at the P7 device. Let's go with this one right here. This P7, and by the way, when you're looking at this and whether you should buy one, the price right now is about $10 US for this little device. That's this one right here. Mine happens to come in a clearer case for some reason. But this is the 07 version. It says it has a 20 dB SoC amplifier and a 3 dB antenna. If you look over at their information up here on that chart, or the ranking, you'll see here that it actually talks about this being a 5 dB. Let me find it real quick. It says that as of February 2024, and maybe this has been corrected by now, all coordinator firmware for this chip supports only a 5 dB signal amplifier. So there's a little confusion to me on whether it's 20 dB or 5 dB. If you need 20 dB and you want to guarantee you're going to get 20 dB, go with this stuff here, which is the SLZB-06 devices. And what else has it? Let me just double check. Not the P7, but the P2 chip would be this is 06 here. So keep that in mind when you're looking at these devices later on. If you want to purchase one, make sure you get the one that works best for your environment, including the range and the signal capability of the device. So I've personally tested the SLZB-07p7. I've tested the SLZB-07. Both of those are USB. And then I've done the SLZB-06M version. The M version does matter over thread. It is also PoE powered, so I have it plugged directly into my PoE powered network port, so I don't have to use a secondary power supply with it. A couple things to note about both of the USB versions. I've got both of them plugged into my Zimaboard, and that Zimaboard the ports are not blocked because the form factor of the controllers are small enough. Now, one of these I'm running Matter over Thread, the other one I'm using is strictly a Zigbee coordinator, and I'm doing this in Proxmox. I've got a Proxmox install running Home Assistant OS, and under the Home Assistant OS Proxmox hardware setup, you can see that I have both devices here. This one's using the CP210-2N USB to UART bridge controller, and the other one is the SMLZB-07, which is this one right here. And they're just using the entire port. Now you can do vendor device ID, but for some reason when I restarted things, it lost that, so I just went straight to port pass-through. So I'm passing the port directly into Proxmox Home Assistant's instance from the hardware, the Zimaboard. So no issues with that at all. It worked flawlessly. So when you go into Home Assistant, you can see that the devices are recognized by the hardware. So going into hardware and looking at all the hardware, I have two USB devices. One is the serial by USB, which is the P7 version, and then I have the other one that's the 07 version. So I have both of these set up within a Home Assistant, like I said, through Proxmox. And then if I go into add-ons and I look at the add-ons dashboard, I have two instances of Zigbee2MQTT. Now let me take a moment and just talk about that. You can run multiple instances of Zigbee2MQTT. For one of those, I have the SLZB-06 connected over IP. And for the other one, I have the SLZB-07p7 connected. That one is connected directly to the USB port. In order to run two different versions of Zigbee2MQTT, you have to change the port, the network port that it's running. You have to change the MQTT subtopic, so it points to a different subtopic. And you need to change the configuration file location. There's a write-up on the SMLIGHT website that talks about how to run multiple versions of Zigbee to MQTT. So let's talk about now the user interface that you have with these devices. Now, if you're using any of the Wi-Fi / Ethernet-based devices, not the USB, you're going to get a nice web interface. They are pretty much similar for all of them, and they all do the same thing in terms of configuration and whatnot. Then this is the dashboard that you get with it. You can set different modes. Right now, I'm in a Zigbee to Ethernet mode. If you wanted to use Zigbee to Wi-Fi mode, you could do that. And if you wanted to use Zigbee to USB mode, you could also do that. That means you can plug directly into a USB port with this device. Now, you'll have to power it using non-PoE version. I do have the PoE version set up so that I actually have power to it. And then, of course, you can set static addresses. You can set up Wi-Fi information. One of the neat features of this is that you can actually put these devices somewhere else, even out over the internet somewhere. And you can bring the devices that it's connecting to back into your local Home Assistant instance over the internet. Now, to do that, you need to make sure that you're running something like a VPN, and there is support for WireGuard VPN right in the device itself, and you would set that up via the UI as well. Now, there are configuration options available if you're doing different types of configurations. For Zigbee to MQTT, you basically take this information and put it in your Zigbee to MQTT serial port section. If you're doing ZHA, you do this here for your ZHA setup. And if you're doing USB, you have to go do a couple things here to find the path, just like I showed you a minute ago. This is the serial port of the device if it's directly showing up in your Home Assistant instance. And then finally, there's security. You can disable the web server whenever there's a socket connection, which is this. You can enable web server authentication, and you can enable whitelist information or whitelist for the socket. So there are security options to prevent somebody from messing with this device as well. You can do firmware updates under settings and tools. So if you want to go out here and you wanted to set or update the firmware, you can do that here. Updating the firmware gives you some interesting options. In fact, this one probably needs some updates. I'll have to look and see. But you can do Zigbee updates, over-the-air updates. You can do core. Now this is core for the device itself. This is for Zigbee updates. So there's some changes here for the Zigbee updates as well. Now you can use the new Ember adapter for this. When I installed this, there was an issue telling me that the EZSP was going to go away in place of this Ember adapter setting or option. So if you flash this, then you can start using the adapter Ember. And I think you saw that earlier when I showed you that. So you have the ability to update this. Now, if you're doing things like adding custom core firmware, you can do that here as well. You can flash for the M version. You can flash OpenThread on it. But you need to do that directly on the device itself. You've got LED settings, time settings, and then of course you have a system log as well to tell you what's going on with it. So that's the web interface. It makes it very nice and very easy to be able to manage these devices, to get them at least up and running into your network. And then all your information in terms of temperatures, memory, and all of that is here. How many devices you have connected. So we have one client device connected, which is all I have right now. Whether it's got internet access, your VPN and all of that. Here's your Ethernet status, your Wi-Fi status. Just basic stuff to look at what's going on with it. All right, so flashing this stuff or flashing devices is just as easy as doing any Zigbee device. You would open up Zigbee to MQTT. You would take your device, you would put Zigbee to MQTT in permit mode. And then you would take a device, and in my case, I'm using this right here. This is a little Aquara temperature sensor, and it's it won't focus, but anyway, it's a little Aquara temperature humidity sensor. It's Zigbee. In fact, I have two of these. I'm running them both right here. One's a studio, one's a test one, and I've got them both connected to this. This one right here is my temp humidity. That's the one I just showed you here, the small one. Well, they're the same. And it's connected. I just paired it like I would anything else. And then looking at it, you get all the basic information you would with any other device. As long as your controller's working, these SLZB devices are working, Everything else is going to be the same in terms of how you pair these. Now, just keep in mind that Zigbee still has a loose standard. So not everything is compatible with every type of software. Some things will work in Zigbee to MQTT, some things will work in ZHA and vice versa, or will work in both, right? So keep in mind when you're pairing these. I use these Aquaras in Zigbee to MQTT because it has support for them. A lot of times Zigbee to MQTT will have better support for edge devices, new devices than ZHA. ZHA is more standards dependent. So if you don't follow the standards, you may not have your device in ZHA. So I digress. Now keep in mind that the controllers I'm talking about today, the SLZB series from SMLIGHT, they're compatible out of the box with both Home Assistant ZHA and Zigbee to MQTT. So if you buy those and you're running ZHA, you'll be fine. And if you're running Zigbee to MQTT, you'll be fine. Plug it in. Make sure it has a good network connection. If you're using the network version, make sure the USB stuff is passed through to your whatever device or it gets recognized in Home Assistant. And then bingo, you're ready to go. Now, as far as Matter goes, I have a Matter device I wanted to try on one of these. And I tried it on the SLZB-07. And if you look at the box, there is a symbol on there. It says Thread Matter Ready. It doesn't mean that it's flash with that. So you actually have to go in and you have to flash it, at least at the time of this video. Now, they have a flasher page that allows you to flash different devices. Now, there's an FAQ that gives you some basic information, and then you can choose the device that you want to flash and then do it, right? So connecting the SLZB to the PC is your first step. It does have some documentation here, and if we look at that, just some basic information about doing this. The default device, or the device by default, comes with a bootloader. Only official firmware can be flashed, so you have to go through this setup. You go to that tool, you plug in the SLZB-07, you'll press the change firmware, unlock the bootloader, and then you'll have the option to install Zigbee with the regular Zigbee firmware, which it already has, the multi-pan RCP firmware to work with Matter or Thread, the Thread firmware to use as a Thread router, or you can upload your own custom firmware. Now, I chose OpenThread when I did this, not multi-pan, because multi-pan supposedly is being deprecated by Home Assistant. So I chose OpenThread, and I flashed that onto the coordinator. And once I did that, I went back over to Home Assistant. I installed and made sure I had the Matter server add-on. I made sure I had the OpenThread border router installed. And then I went over to the integrations page. Now you can do this way. You can add Matter via the integrations page and it will install the Matter add-on for you. And then if I look at Matter, I actually have one device connected. And if you want the Matter information for that, well, that was nice. If you want the device information, you can get that here. I can tell you what node ID it is. The network type is Wi-Fi, obviously in device. And then the IP address, IPv6 address, and then some other IPv6. I think these are borders and gateways and stuff like that. I don't spend much time in the Matter world because it's so beta and it's just so clunky, and just it's not there yet. So as they become more mature, I'll probably do more stuff with it. But for now, my Zigbee, my Z-Wave, all of that stuff works just fine without having to use Matter stuff. So what is my recommendation? I don't have a recommendation. And it's because it's really up to you what you want to do with the device and how you're going to put it into your network and everything else. Again, there's just a lot of these different devices to choose from, and they all serve a purpose. I would really start by, number one, looking at this table here on their website and deciding what you want to do with it. And then I also would say, look at the ranking here and look at the discussion here. One other thing I want to point out that they mention here is essentially you can have up to 200 end devices in Zigbee. Just the firmware is the limitation there. So even with the maximum number of Zigbee devices, these chips are only running, or this one says not even close to the maximum. There's no difference in speed comparison to other chips in the CC265p7 series or the series. And then over here, I think they gave an actual percentage number of 30%. of usage, if I can find that here. Yeah, so the P7, they're ranked number 2. At the same time, neither the processor nor the memory is used by 30% even when the chip is operating in coordinator mode with maximum possible number of connected end devices. So it's really going to come down to 2 things for me. If I were to make a decision on this, do I have an Ethernet port with PoE in a far-reaching place in my house or a remote location where I have Zigbee devices? If so, can I plug this in and reach my Home Assistant instance rather than having to run 2 Home Assistant instances? Or do I just need the USB connectivity to plug into my Home Assistant Blue, my Green, my Raspberry Pi, something else, or a Zimaboard in my case? If that's all I need, then I just need one of the 07 devices or one of the USB devices that they list here. So really, it's up to you what you want to do. A lot of devices to choose from, a lot of things to look at. The pricing on this may determine it. You know, if you can get an SLZB-07 for $10 and it's USB powered and you plug it in, great. So I'm seeing the SMLIGHT SLZB-06 for about $70 or US dollars. And then I'm seeing the P7, 06P7 for about 75 US dollars. Now, I also found the SLZB-06M for $40 over at Cloud Free. And remember, this is based on the EFR32 chip. So it's experimental in Zigbee2MQTT, but it is available for a cheaper price than the SLZB-06 that I just showed. So picking up the 07 for a whopping $10 US makes this a steal to get these right now. So if you're interested in getting that, I would go for the SLZB-07 strictly on price. So yeah, pricing may be a factor. You'll just have to work that out and see what you need and what you want to pay for something like this. I think it's well worth it, honestly. Having the capability of just plugging this in anywhere, USB, PoE, non-PoE, whichever way you want to power it, and whichever way you want to connect to it. It's a great device to use and to add Zigbee devices to your Home Assistant, Zigbee2MQTT, or ZHA networks. And that's it for this video on the SMLIGHT SLZB Zigbee controllers. If you have any questions, put those down in the comments below. You can also ask me on Discord. If you're not a subscriber, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I would really, really appreciate it. And you can also join as a channel member as well. That would help support me what I do here. And with that, I thank you so much for watching this and all my videos, and we will see you on the next one.